today, we're going to talk about the 1920s. So what are we looking for in the 1920s? We're looking to see how progressivism was reflected in the 1920s. Does that make sense? Didn't we see that when we were talking about the foreign policy? How is progressivism reflected in the foreign policy? That was our very last lecture, the one we had on Wednesday. I know it was 5 days ago, so you guys forgive. You can look at your notes. How is progressivism reflected in World War I? Anyone? Shoot it out. You don't want. You don't have to have a perfect vocabulary. It doesn't have to be textbook. Just in plain language. How do you think World War I reflects progressivism? I'm going to hold off on Jason for a second because I want you guys to try to give a guess here. Because this is part of the things that you're going to be saying in your essay. How do you see progressivism in World War I? It's really easy to see progressivism in urban politics, isn't it? That's pretty easy. Okay? I think it's pretty easy to see it even in the election of 1912, remember? And all their different economic policies, because all of these candidates all described themselves as being progressive. They all thought that they could make the world better, the country better, but they all had different views of doing it. How do we see progressivism in World War I? America's role in World War I. Ooh, Sammy.
I'm not sure.
Why isn't this on? Good.
This is going to sound kind of funky since sounding funky in my head, but anyway.
Okay, go ahead.
It's because we only got in it because our hand was shown.
Yes, forced. Yes.
Our hand was forced in it, and we didn't sign entry because what we knew was going to happen. Germany wasn't going to do anything. France and England were just after it for territory.
Okay.
We weren't in it for imperialism.
You say it sounds funky. It's just a vocabulary.
Yeah.
You're right on the ball.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, but let me.
It's going to sound funky when I say
Yeah. Okay,
it.
but let me give you the vocabulary because you're right. What you're describing is right. So World War I. Remember, we don't want to get into World War I. We are isolationists. And the reason why we're isolationists for the longest time is that, number one, we thought we were a little weak. That's where George Washington wanted us to be isolationists. We didn't want to be sucked into Europeans' war. But then by the time we get to the late 1800s, we don't want to go in there because we have this sense of manifest destiny. And we think that Europe is corrupt. Europe is corrupt, right? So we don't want to be an empire. Anti-imperialism. That's why we don't go in there. And you say, well, why did we go in there? Jason, what were you going to say? What was your explanation for this?
I was going to say, well, we went in there with the intention that it really would be the war to end all wars.
Yes, 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 yes. The war to end all wars. And how was that going to work? The war to end all wars. It was going to end all wars because we were going to put democracy on a global level. Democracy is peaceful. Democracy respects individual rights. That's why we don't have lots of uprisings and political revolutions and all that type of stuff. Democracy leads to peace. And so we put democracy at global level. And that would end all wars. And how were we going to do that? What was the body, what was the institution that we were supporting to do that? League of Nations. That would be the new democracy. No one would have to fight. They have a problem with each other. They bring it to the League of Nations. They bring it to the World Court. And then they could avoid war. Now, how does this reflect progressivism? Remember, what is one of the key definitions of progressivism? You have to go back to the very first lecture to get this.
Progress?
Faith in progress. You might even say a blind faith, absolute conviction. Remember, we spent the whole hour talking about how today we're not really progressive, because even though we believe that technology will progress, we don't have much faith that it will be good. We don't really have faith that humanity will progress. But in the turn of the century, 1900, 1915, we genuinely believed we could fix pretty much anything. Poverty, sanitation, security, mental illness, crime. We could fix it all. Mainly we were focusing at home. But we didn't want to get into the war. But once we get in the war, we said, okay, we're going to get into that war. It's going to be the war to end all wars. Wilson truly believed this is not being naive. This is being very confident in our ability to find a better solution. That's progressivism. It's huge. Clearly an expression of progressive idealism. Of course, what happens?
Yes, now we have another war.
Yeah, they don't know what's going to happen, 20 years later.
Yeah.
20 years later. They don't know. We know. They don't know. But what's going to happen? Am I not on? What am I doing here? Okay. What happens with World War I? Do we make it? You say we have another war in 20 years. We know that because 20 years have long gone and passed. But they at that time don't believe it. Why? We win the war. It's our troops that push the balance. And so the war is over in 17 minutes. 17 months. We win it. Why don't we come home whooping and hollering and saying this is the coolest thing ever? Why are we disillusioned? You know, you're in a basketball game. The team's behind. The coach throws you in. You go in. You get all the winning shots. Boom, the team wins. When the game is over, depressed or happy? Happy, obviously. Why weren't we happy?
We didn't want to get into it in the first place.
Yes, we didn't, but we thought once we're going to get in it, we're going to do big things. But
Because we didn't get any of our goals from
we didn't. Our goals weren't to beat Germany. It wasn't our goal to beat Germany. This would be it. It'd be like you're going in, you're the last guy, and you make all the hits or baskets. You win the game, right? But you were hoping for that ESPN guy to watch you and put your name forward so that you get picked up by a league. And nobody was there. Nobody saw it. So you win, but you're terribly disappointed. And you're disappointed because what you wanted was bigger than what you got. The United States wanted to end all wars. But the Treaty of Versailles was a terrible disappointment for the people of the United States. Because it said Germany is at fault. And so therefore, Germany must pay tons of money. And therefore, England and France pretty much get all their objectives, which is basically imperialism.
And they used us as a pawn.
And they used us as a pawn. That's exactly right. They used us as a pawn. That's exactly right. So we felt used because this is not why we went into the war. This was not why we went into the war. Remember, we weren't against Germany. We fought them because they attacked us. We weren't necessarily for England. From our perspective, all of them were at fault. And so when the Versailles Treaty says Germany is the one at fault, Germany has to pay, England and France get to do this, we were so upset that not only did we not accept the Treaty of Versailles, but what also didn't we accept? By the way, completely our idea. What also we didn't? We rejected the League of Nations. This is the democracy that we have been shooting for. But democracy is a funny thing. It's only democratic if it really represents the people. If you exclude Germany, or at least put them at a secondary level, then the Americans look at this and say, you know what, that League of Nations is kind of a tool to keep England and France up and to push Germany down. We don't want anything to do with that. We wanted democracy, not corruption. Wilson's head was spinning when he was there. He accepted it because it sounded like it was a deal. I mean, if you really think about it, the French and the English, they lose each nearly 2 million people, and we're expecting them to go back to their home. They're elected people, right? We expect them to go back to their home and tell their people, yes, all the deaths that you suffered, I'm sorry, it was our fault. You know, it's not the Germans. It was everybody's fault. The whole thing was a big mistake. Sorry about all that. Can they do that
They
really?
would have riots. if
No,
said that.
they need to find somebody, and so they have to put it on Germany. You have to look at this from kind of a very personal perspective. You know, what did the United States lose? We lost a lot of people, but nothing like Germany and England. What about the destruction of our territory?
Nothing of our.
Nothing. There's no war on our territory. It's easier for us, especially since from the very beginning we said, oh, this is a corrupt war, this is a corrupt war. We don't want to be in it, and we're not in it. You know, from 1914 to 1917, 3 years, we say, no, it's corrupt. It's easy for us to say, yeah, it was corrupt. We just helped clean it up for those corrupt people.
We pretty much did their dirty work.
It's hard for England and France to do that. So we, in hindsight, are not surprised that the Versailles Treaty was what it was, right? They're not greedy, they're not, it's a very human emotions. Nevertheless, the Americans were absolutely disillusioned. Because we only went in there because we were going to make a change. And we really believed that it would work. But again, amazing faith in progress. It's an amazing faith that reason will be enough to let the English and the French go back home and tell all their brothers and sisters and fathers, no, sorry, all those people that died, it's just our fault. That's an amazing belief. Yeah, I don't want to be too naive or bring up any modern examples, but I do want you to have something you can relate to. So let's say you have a big riot somewhere, and somebody comes up and just says, well, why can't you guys just get along? Why can't you just get along?
The ideals get in the way.
Well, yes, they should get along, right? I mean, you and I and all of us, we get along just fine. Why can't they get along? Well, what happened? Something other than reason. And so once reason is gone, then you can't use it to get people to calm down. Once reason was gone, if this was a corrupt war, at least from the European part, then the Americans' very confident trust that things will be solved is a little bit premature. So after the war, we were disillusioned. That's important to understand.